Well, welcome to today's Spatial-Next talk. I am going to spend a few minutes reflecting on what was a really interesting week last week. I spent the week in Palm Springs with Esri and came back with some fascinating insight. In fact, I am going to give you a little taster of what I'm going to tell you about. Key terms that came out of the summits, plural, were enterprise, embed, integration, real-time 2D, 3D. So let's dive in. So let me just begin by saying it was joyous to be with other people. We've spent so much time in lockdown and having virtual meetings, which has been great, but there is nothing quite like being around people face to face. And here is a picture, and those of you that are observant would see that there's something actually, as you can tell, this is an old picture, because at the summits last week, we were all wearing face masks, unfortunately. So interaction with people was, we were all physically there, but trying to tell people by their eyes was challenging. But even so, it was a joy to once again be with other human beings in our geospatial world. I'm going to just really the goal of this video is to give you a teaser for a blog post I'm going to write on this, in which is going to be in more depth. But I would say what I'm going to write and tell you about today, change is upon us. That was really my take home from what I saw in a week spent in Palm Springs. So let me give you a sense of what that looks like. So I was actually at the two conferences there. So there was a partner conference which started things off, and then it rolled into the developer conference. So really I really went there with two areas of focus. I was really, I work for 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐻𝐿 as a Geospatial Innovations Director. So innovation is front of mind for me, but it doesn't just mean technology innovation, it also means business innovation. So the partner conference was really focused around interacting with others, getting people's thoughts, talking to Esri folks that are on the business side of things, and kind of getting a sense of where things are moving to. So I really think my overall goal was to be at both conferences, was to get a sense of where the wind was blowing, not only from a business perspective and see where innovation is happening, where things are moving, where customers are beginning to think, but also from a technological perspective, what's actually being released, what's new and exciting, again, where that wind is blowing. So there are really four key themes that I came away with, and let me just list them briefly. First of all is enterprise integration. There was a huge amount of talk about enterprise integration. Jack spoke about it in many of the sessions I went to. Integration was front and center, enterprise was front and center. And I've argued many times over the last 2 or 3 years since I've been talking about Geospatial 2.0 and Geospatial-Next, that we've isolated ourselves to departments, particularly the GIS and mapping department. I think where the big push is now is to talk more widely about the enterprise and to actually break out of departments and actually have GIS used more widely. So one of the central themes of Geospatial-Next and 2.0 has been this, and again it was a very core theme at the summits that I attended, so that was great to see. Embed in business systems. One of my focal points at 𝐂𝐨𝐬𝐻𝐿 is the embedding of ArcGIS and GIS in general, geospatial technology, into various business systems. And the type of systems we're talking about here are SAP, and I'm just going to list a few. Others were included in some of the sessions I went to, but SAP, Salesforce, AWS and Amazon, Microsoft, that's Microsoft Teams, Power BI, etc., etc. But really the core part of that, and again a central piece of the work that I do and have been focused on for the last year, is how do we embed GIS in business workflows. So sometimes I use that term invisible, not really invisible in the sense that you can't see it, invisible in the sense it's just part of the workflow. It's no longer the front and center of the conversation. It is a natural part of a business workflow, and it's embedded in there. And it can be a map, but it also can be an answer to a geospatial question. So another key theme that came out was embedding in business systems. Data integration, this is a huge one. And again, I hark back to some of the conversations I've had. I actually I actually left the GIS spatial world about 3 or 4 years ago because I was really interested in multi-dimensional data. And at that time, GIS really wasn't offering very good multi-dimensional data integration. The systems I worked with a different organization were quite interesting, but GIS has caught up. And data integration and the conversations, I've never seen multi-dimensional mentioned in any conversations in sort of Esri world, but now we're talking very much about multi-dimensional data, which is wonderful. So it's kind of some of the themes that came out, and again, I'll share more in future videos and in the article I'm writing, but reality capture, Sure for ArcGIS, I need to dig more into that one actually, but that's really quite interesting, the whole reality capture world, Sure. We're now beginning to see the conversation around image and remote sensing. So this convergence, again, another conversation piece that I've been having over the last little while is we're beginning to see these technologies come together, geospatial technologies and data coming together. And that term convergence, I'm using that term. I didn't actually see that word used. Maybe I heard it mentioned, but really that's what we're talking about here. IoT was a big part of the conversation. All these miniaturized sensors that can send back data from all over the planet. That's stationary and moving. Point clouds and textured meshes were a big deal. So really, again, another theme that's been in the geospatial next conversation is breaking out of two dimensions. I've mentioned quite often that we've sort of lived in this two-dimensional mapping world. We're beginning to break out of that. We're beginning to talk about different data sets, multi-dimensional data. So that we're seeing this paradigm shift away from just 2D. 2D is not going away, but we're adding these other dimensions to it, which is fantastic. So the fourth and last theme that I'm going to mention in this talk is real-time 2D and 3D. And this is where I get super excited. So we've started to see, and again, I've never seen this before in an Esri conference, but 3D systems of record. That was actually mentioned multiple times. Wonderful. That means 3D visualization and analytics. And I spent time with the 3D teams at the dev conference, chatting to them about 3D and where 3D is going, and some of the challenges that we still face. I mean, we're still looking at a world where we're good at telling stories about 2D, but we're not really building out stories for customers around 3D. So things are changing. We've got the tools now to do that. So now we've got some business innovation to start to focus on, more on that in the future. Velocity is a huge deal. Velocity is now being added to ArcGIS Online. So we're taking your event server and bringing it up to the cloud. What does that mean? It means far easier ways to bring in real-time data. That's huge. To me, that was probably the single biggest technical thing that I saw there. And I saw many cool things, but that I think is a real, that's a real going to change the game. Now, game engine integration is interesting. I spent quite a bit of time talking about this. I've always had the idea that Unity and these other organizations are building these fantastic gaming engines which allow us to sort of have a 3D, 4D experience, real-time experience. But what I didn't realize is a lot of those games are actually built in a sort of an imaginary way. They're not the real world, they're an imaginary world. I did realize that, but it really came home to me that the integrated GIS is a representation of the real world, stuff that's actually got a place in the real world. The gaming engines are great ways of visualizing data, and so bringing the gaming engines and ArcGIS together is a huge deal, I think, as we start to look forward about digitizing our world and the metaverse and all these things that are way forward. But when we start thinking about this, there is a place for bringing these together, and I realized at the conference how important it is to bring ArcGIS and some of these game engines together. So that was a big deal. Immersive and augmented reality is also something huge. I mean, I gravitate towards things like, there's some folks talking about the spatial web, which is part of the Web 3.0 conversation. Again, we're talking ahead here. But augmented reality gives us a sense of we can put on glasses, for example, and see what's underground, the pipes that are underground that are maybe stored in a GIS. We can also see things that have been architected, BIM, for example. So if we've architected a building and we haven't built it yet, we can actually place it in the real world where it's going to be, and we can put on glasses and actually see it. So augmented reality to me is a massive step forward, and we're rapidly moving towards that. Where's a lot of that data going to come from? Potentially from a GIS. So I might be looking at the real world through a pair of glasses, and I'm not talking about completely immersive. I'm just talking about normal glasses that are connected to a phone, that I can actually add data to those glasses. That's potentially going to be pulled out of GIS. So again, huge potential there. So I'm going to say here, we're beginning to see the emergence of spatial reality. You know, I like that term, spatial reality, and I believe we're moving towards a world where we're digitizing everything. So, you know, we're moving towards that world, and I think the conference made me realize that the things that, well, let's just move to the last slide. My parting thoughts is Spatial-Next is becoming a reality. I'm using that reality word again, but the things that I've been thinking about, and many others have been talking through, is this changing world and this sort of inflection point. And Spatial-Next to me is that inflection point. But when I started the conversation and with others, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, it was really something that was a thought process, looking ahead and thinking, well, this is coming. Well, going to the Palm Springs conference, I realized that these things are now being built. So some of the things that were in my mind and others' minds years ago are now becoming a reality within a really solid, you know, system like ArcGIS. So I think pretty exciting times, and in terms of sort of the Spatial-Next conversation, it's fantastic. The challenge now is we have the tools, we've seen massive technology innovation, but we're still behind on the business innovation, and I'll cover that in my blog post a little bit, but a little bit more in videos. But we now have to build use cases which are, for example, real-time 3D use cases that customers are going to want to actually adopt. And we know that customers are going to be slow in adopting new things, but there are some really powerful use cases that we have to build and to show customers, to bring them forward, for them to realize the benefit of what is, again, this massive inflection point. So there's my relatively quick thoughts on the summits that I went to. Again, I'll write them up in a blog post, but it really was an excellent week. I don't think I've enjoyed more an Esri conference or summit before as much as I did this one. So it's all online, so go watch it. And if you've got any questions for me, please feel free to ping me. I'll be happy to respond. So again, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us on the Spatial-Next channel. We're focused here on understanding the future of geospatial. That's both how we get to mainstream adoption of the technology and data, and how we start using blockchain and crypto to move things forward. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and we look forward to seeing you next time.